Sometimes I feel like I should have been a chess player in a different time period. Modern chess is pretty deeply analyzed by computers and databases and otherwise. And every now and then I'll get an itch to be creative and play a move that I think, hey, this is interesting. Now, the following game we're going to take a look at, I was playing against a Lee Chess 2200 rated player, and I don't get around to playing aggressively with e4 anymore, but we got a Najdorf game, and it's pretty typical up until about move 9. And I choose the classical variation. This is favored by the more solid folks, like when Karpov was an e4 player, he played bishop e2, and after e5, knight b3, probably the best square for the knight, and after bishop e6, castles. And here, I think it's because I haven't played this position in so long, I kind of looked at it with fresh eyes and said to myself, okay, what's the typical plan here for black? And black has expansion with b5 and or d5 at some point. And in many Sicilians, like when we look at the Kalashnikov or the Sveshnikov Sicilian that has the same d6 e5 pawn structure, very often white has a maneuver to just sink on d5. And the typical theme is when there's a piece on d5, you want to be able to capture back with the piece. You've normally made a mistake when you're capturing with the pawn. So there were a couple different themes here that were going through my mind when I played this move knight d2. And when you check the database, this move has been played in less than 20 games. But when you turn on the engine eval, engine goes, white still got their first move advantage. So I'm like, okay, I thought I might show this and then did a little analysis. So we're not stopping d5. So what if black plays d5 immediately, deviating from the main game? Well, we can capture. And then knight c4. And therein lies the problem in the position. If we trade queens, there seems to be a problem with a knight dropping into b6 and the e-pawn. So white's just got a little something there. In the main game, knight bd7, a very natural thematic Sicilian move was played. And I continue my plan when I played knight d2. I go knight c4. Well, I'm already bothering the d6 pawn. And I've got this idea to go knight e3 to d5. And after castles, I don't even want the d-pawn. I'm going knight e3, and I'm continuing with my plan to just positionally squeeze in the position. Now, black should definitely be looking to play thematically. So probably b5 is a good idea. And this is something that the engine came up with after the game, of course. Rook e1 and at b4. I'll let you have the e-pawn if you want it. And white has this beautiful coordination. And it's hard to suggest a line for black where they just keep their pawn free and clear. One of the engine lines was here, takes with check, and we get the exchange for the pawn. And piece, of course. So after knight e3, rook c8 was played, and from here on, this was one of those that the Lee Chess engine gave 100% accuracy for white. So I was very pleased with my level of play moving forward from this position. And it's kind of a model game in how to play this 9 knight d2, extremely rare line in the Sicilian Najdorf. And understanding the themes of what a Najdorf player wants, I think I was just having that kind of Karpovian prophylaxis mindset. I want to stop counterplay and take away ideas here. So rook c8 I felt was inaccurate because b5 is the natural move in the Najdorf. So under this logic, what should we do? Well, let's stop b5. So let's gain some space with a4. And after queen b6, Go, okay, queen's okay on this square. What can we do to be annoying? It's like that Ulf Anderson mindset. He always had, what is the most nettlesome thing that I can do? I have, what is the most annoying move in the position? So, of course, I'm less sophisticated than Grandmaster Anderson. Well, a5. Put the question to the queen. And now the queen's on kind of a landmine square because we have the opportunity to play knight d5. Now, in a 3-minute game, of course, I'm inevitably going to mess things. And I see this type of position as black has their normal development. And when your opponent has made all of the natural moves that are typically like all the check marks in the opening of what they're supposed to do, if you can find calm waiting moves, this is normally when you're going to have most players make a mistake. So, from my interpretation of the position, it's like, okay, h3, I'm going to pass the ball back to you. And then you see the opponent go h6. But before we get into that, I did have something more critical here, and I missed an interesting idea. I can actually play knight cd5 immediately, because after pawn takes, the knight on e3 is still covering on c2. And we're breaking with the theme of don't capture on d5, mostly because we have this queenside expansion idea, which is going to be quite strong. Whereas we're slowing down the counterplay that black's supposed to get, playing for f5. This knight on e3 is doing a lot of work in the game. So, knight d2, just saying, could be an interesting variation to test out in your games. So coming back to my thought process here, okay, h3, what are you going to do? I'm like, okay, now I'm looking for another move that just improves my position a little bit and gives the opponent more room to go wrong. Bishop d2. So no problems. Knight c5. All right, you're making a threat. You're bothering my e-pawn. Let's just stop that. Prophylaxis. And now you're looking to play d5. You got everybody lined up. So no, I'm not going to allow it. Take with a pawn, because that e3 knight's doing so much work. Now let's get the queenside plan going. c4. And with these waiting moves, we were able to coax this rook away from where it needed to be. It was needed for the action and supporting the attack. So we did get something positive out of the deal. e4. Like, okay, this doesn't bother me any. And in fact, I can pick up some time. And this is kind of an interesting moment to make a decision. If you capture with the rook, you're going to give the knight the e4 square. If you capture with the bishop, you're going to give the knight the d3 square. So what do you want to allow your opponent to do? In this case, after thinking about it, I liked taking with the bishop because queen b3 is a follow-up where there's no tempo, there's no attack on any piece when I allow the knight to go to d3. So this is more control in the position. And after knight e5, we can simply and calmly just go back where we've got 3 defenders on c4 and black has 3 attackers. And without calculation, we know if it's 3 versus 3, defender wins. If it's an equal number of attackers and defenders, this is going to be the case. So the opponent goes bishop g5. I want to remove a guard. Okay, I'm going to use a piece that's not doing anything because c4 is the charged point in the position. Everything's focusing here. Takes, takes. Now rook e8, lining up for potential discoveries. So, before handling this, I'm just going to put the question to the queen. Let's get you off the c file so you have less control. Then I'm just going to come back to d4. Because at some point, I'm going to want to start pushing this queenside pawn majority. And we could have just a little bit more pressure on the knight. So knight g6, all right. Direct idea. You're bothering my bishop. Rook f2. Flexibility. I defend the bishop. I like the bishop on the square. And I potentially, at some point, may want to swap gears, double up and attack. b5. Well, even 2200s forget the rules of chess from time to time. What did he miss here? Hopefully you said en passant. We take those. And after f5, now we're in knee-jerk reaction territory where we're just looking for anything to complicate. I believe my opponent was starting to get into time trouble as well. So no need to rush. The opponent's rushed. Let them sit in the tension when they don't have a lot of time, and more mistakes are going to flow. What's the most annoying move we can find here? Hopefully, you looked at bishop h5. It's newly minted weakness. Nothing's defending the knight. So rook e4. Like, well, I like the bishop pair in the open position, but I know I'm going to have the better bishop in the long term. I've got this pawn majority that's marching forward, and I don't see the counterplay. So bishop b5. Let's take that pawn with tempo on the rook. Shut down that rook from being able to get to any square that's useful. I make sure that black can't use the f-file. No hurry. Check. Hitting the rook. Hitting the queen. And I think this was just mass time trouble at this point, but the opponent plays rook g8, followed by queen takes g8, mate. So, a quick game that I felt the ideas were relatively straightforward. It's one of those when anytime you see 100% accuracy, you got to be satisfied as a chess player. And looking at the engine, you're like, okay. It's like, oh, he cheating? No, not necessarily. Sometimes the ideas are just very, very clear, very, very clean, and there's lots of moves that maintain a sizable advantage positionally. So this is one of those games, and I'd advocate for looking into this solid 9 knight d2. Let's get some more games in the database with it.